Welcome to the Insights to Communicate podcast with Adam Probalski, where market and opinion research come together with public affairs and PR.
All right, welcome, Jared Evans. So glad you joined us. Jared, I'm going to let you tell us about yourself because I don't want to mess up the bio. Give us the 30 seconds or the 90 seconds on who you are and how you got to where you are today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Adam. I'm Jared Evans. I'm a senior policy counsel with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, which is the nation's oldest and foremost civil rights law organization founded by Thurgood Marshall in 1940. And I primarily work on political participation, which is the census, redistricting, and voting rights. I'm lead counsel on Robinson versus Ardwin, which is kind of my claim to fame. That's the case where we are challenging Louisiana's congressional map in court to get a second majority black district.
Fantastic. Reading your background and your bio, your trajectory, it's, I don't normally say this, but it's really, it's kind of typical in that, not in the success you've had, because you've had some really impressive successes and associations with elected officials who've had big accomplishments, but you kind of took that path through the kind of public policy, political world to the place you are today. Is there anything that isn't on your bio that like we're missing? You work for mayors and legislators and that, but is there something that you like just leave out and they're like, oh yeah, I didn't tell them about I was a lifeguard, or I didn't tell them that I, something else?
Nothing other than I was a theater kid in college, in high school, which I think is pretty typical of DC too. Ketanji Brown Jackson, Ted Cruz, and a few other big names were theater kids too. But
okay.
Yeah, I think everything's there. But I'll just say all of this started volunteering on a local campaign. That's really how this all started. My freshman year of college. The local state representative was in the middle of his reelection, and I had to go interview him from one of my classes. And when the interview was over, little did I know that he was interviewing me as well. And he asked if I want to come with him to some event he was having. I think it was some kind of festival with him and his team. And from there, I joined full time and then became his legislative assistant. And so that's kind of the foundation of how I got started in this industry.
So I love that story because I tell people all the time, if you show up at a party headquarters or a candidate, office, they will suck you in. Like
Absolutely.
Because they are hungry for volunteers, hungry for supporters. And if you show any little bit of interest, they will suck you in. So anyone who has any interest in politics or public policy, show up. They'll find a role for you. They'll find a place for you.
Absolutely. Campaigns are the best way to cut your teeth, and you built the most foundational relationships on them too.
100%. Those 10 o'clock at night, stuffing envelopes or organizing the precinct walk for the next morning, and
or putting yard signs together. Like that was my thing. That was my first thing. They literally taking the metal forks that go into the ground and putting the signs on top of them. Like that was like my first job.
Oh yeah, 100%. And then at like 2 o'clock in the morning, actually putting them out, the late night pizza and all that stuff. So yeah, it's kind of amazing how almost all of us who are in some way involved in this public affairs world started in something like that. There's a great, I don't know if you've ever seen it, that great, like some of those great YouTube videos where they're, the kid shows up and, I want to be a political consultant. And it's always like, well, yeah, okay, now go volunteer over here. No, I want to be a campaign manager. It's like, okay, you got give me a little bit of time, a little bit of volunteer effort, and we'll get you there.
Absolutely.
Very cool. So, is there like a mentor, that one person beyond, and maybe it's that first legislator you volunteered with, that you need to give a shout out to, because every day you think back and say, that was the moment that, changed my life. That was the person that gave me the opportunity or gave me that piece of advice that moved me along.
Well, you struck it right on the head. It was that state representative at the time who then went on to become the state senator, who then went on to become the president of Grambling State University and is now the president of the University of Louisiana Systems Board. I often think every time I have a new office, the first picture I put up is a picture of me putting out a yard sign with him in some rural part of North Louisiana, because that's really how I got my start. And when I think about it, pretty much every other job I've had since then is based off of the relationships I built there. As you know, this is a industry that's 100% built off of your network and relationships. And because I worked with him at the Capitol and knew many of the legislatures, that's how I got hired there as a staff attorney. And then when it came time to redistricting, they needed someone who was familiar with the culture, with the politics, with the elected officials, with the process. And so that's kind of how I ended up here at LDF. So definitely President Rick Gallo, who I give much credit to for my trajectory.
So I feel like there's some people who listen to that story and the idea of the relationships matter so much. And like I talk sometimes to college students, and I feel like some of them think there's something wrong with a system where relationships matter so much. There's something wrong with a system where the opportunities that people like you and I get are tied so much to who we know and building of relationships, because that's hard. I think maybe partly, and partly because it doesn't seem like it's so fair that if that they can't compete for the same opportunities that we can because our relationships trump that stuff. So how do we explain that you know it is appropriate, it is equitable, it is logical in that system, and they have that same chance too?
It's extremely fair because I feel that nearly all of the elected officials that I've worked with or worked for, the number one quality that they appreciate over your mental fortitude or what schools you went to, what degrees you have, is loyalty. Loyalty is it. That's what they want more than anything else, is someone who's going to be loyal and trustworthy. And so when you spend time with them, as I did, helping draft bills or working with them in their field offices or just answering questions, you build up that trust and you build up those relationships. And that's really how this industry runs. And if someone thinks that's unfair, I mean, it's unfair that some people can get into Harvard and others can't. There's I don't just buy into the argument of fairness.
I love it. Yeah, it's very true. I think if you can demonstrate yourself to the people that are interested in having you around, demonstrate your
Mm-hmm.
loyalty and your capability, of course. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and there's we if you pursue it, you'll have those opportunities. You definitely will. Um,
Absolutely.
all right. So, as you know, I'm a pollster. We do polling. We do focus groups. I think it's an
Mm-hmm.
important part of the legislative process. It's important part of the policymaking process. Part of lobbying. Do you
Mm-hmm.
have a moment in time, a story where polling focus groups, where that sort of thing is like come into play, and it's like that was a part of your win or a part of your decision making process?
Oh, absolutely. So I'll age myself on this, but I was working for U.S. Senator Mary Landrieu, who was a senior senator from Louisiana at the time, 2009, during the height of the healthcare debate. And for those veterans who know what that was like, it was a very, very intense time here in DC. It was President Obama's first year, and there was much angst amongst his side of the aisle over him choosing to do healthcare first. And the big debate at that time was whether there would be a public option in the final bill that got to his desk. And most of the National Party was in favor of it. Speaker Pelosi at the time was in favor of it. And the debate was whether that was something that Senator Landrieu, who was from at the time a very purple state, would support. And a poll was done that showed that the majority of people in her state were opposed to a public option. And so that pretty much became her position, that uh, she would be in favor of healthcare reform. She would be in favor of the Affordable Care Act, but as long as it did not include a public option. And then the calls into the office were very much, in favor of healthcare reform, but opposed to a public option. So that's, I think, is the first example where I got a taste of how important polling can be to, just a politics and policy making.
Yeah.
And the second, example I'll give is that earlier in this redistricting cycle, we were getting ready to start the legislative process of drawing new maps in Louisiana. And a poll was conducted around the state to show what people's opinions were about, maps being fair and competitive, and how they actually wanted, people of every race and education level actually wanted both parties to compete for their vote. They really wanted to they wanted to have both parties really make the case to them about why they should vote for them. I think thought that was very, very interesting, and we kind of used that in our model to create to more competitive districts.
I love it. Um, all right, so I want to dive in a little bit to the weeds to what you actually do for a living, because I'll give you an example. Here in California, there's a enterprising lawyer, let's say, who uses our laws to force cities to build districts for city council elections, and actually
Mm-hmm.
every local water districts, school districts, to require districts. Um, and there's some logic sometimes to that, to give communities the opportunity to elect a representative that looks, acts, represents them. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it's oftentimes kind of sort of this a process that's somewhat negative, quite frankly, because, or in my opinion, because you end up with cities that are kind of, or agencies that are divided, and
Yeah.
you already have pretty good representation, or you have communities that are very, very similar. There's not a lot of, everybody's Latino, or everybody's, white, or whatever it is, and there's not a lot of logic to it, because there isn't going to
Mm-hmm.
be a minority district necessarily. Um, and I think it really divides communities oftentimes, right? You get into these district scenarios where I'm fighting for this part of the city, I'm fighting for that part of the city, and then the other parts of the city kind of lose out. Um, is there any thought process to that? How do you feel about that? Like, if there's logic to it, great, but if there's not, or even if there is, how do you feel about the idea that places are divided sometimes when they don't need to necessarily be? Or maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Redistricting is the foundation of power, um, for every level of government, from school boards all the way up to Congress. And if there is ever a case when, someone, if you're placed in a district where, you feel like you are the oddball out, or everyone is like you, or there's an odd shape, politics play. Oh, is that me?
No, no.
Okay, okay, sorry. And so our role at LDF, in the redistricting process, is to look at places where minority voters just don't have a chance to elect a candidate of their choice. Where no matter, if there was 100% turnout, they would not simply there would be no one who they would like would be elected. And so on the congressional level, we focus primarily of our work in this on the southern states, from Texas through South Carolina, where the majority of Black people are located in this country. And we chose Louisiana, Alabama, and South Carolina, for to try to push, or attempt to draw, additional minority congressional districts. And my role as senior policy counsel, was to, we were never confident. You're aware of the political realities. For us, this might be about creating additional seats for minorities to elect their candidate of choice. But for many people, it's just about power, and whether, Kevin McCarthy, well, not Kevin McCarthy anymore, but Mike Johnson or Hakeem Jeffries is going to be the speaker. That horse race. And so for us, we really worked to ensure that there was a strong legislative record, for which we could litigate upon. And for that sounds kind of confusing. Just think about it this way: there's no major civil rights case or any case that comes before the Supreme Court that didn't take months and sometimes years to build that record to get there. And so that's kind of my job, is to build that record, is to work with the community, educate them on the importance of the census, educate them on the importance of redistricting, how it relates to roads being built, lights being fixed, whether a hospital or a grocery store is built in your community, taking it basically, as you were talking about earlier, from out of the DC lingo and making it more, so that people in the rural South can understand, and then working with the elected officials who are open to our proposals and to our maps. So that's kind of how we worked in the redistricting process.
I love that you said it's the foundation to, do you say the foundation to democracy or the foundation to
Yeah,
government?
foundation to democracy. Yeah.
Yeah, because people don't really think of it, because most people just don't think of redistricting in general,
Yeah.
or district in general. It's not a part of their daily conversation. But the fact that it is so foundational, because you can use shenanigans to really cook the books.
Hmm.
And so we've got to be conscious of it, I think, but also conscious of the the real benefits versus
Hmm.
the potential harm you could cause, because it goes both ways. Um,
And to that point about it going both ways, I think one thing that we've seen in DC is that redistricting has been used to draw these extreme districts on both sides, and
right.
that's how we get a such a, I don't even want to use the divided, but just such a toxic Congress, to where the biggest election that the majority of people are going to face or challenge they'll face is from their own party, and that used to not be that way. The general election used to be is what people were really concerned about, but because of redistricting, because of extreme drawing and packing people into districts to where nearly 70 or 80% are all the same way, you have members who come to DC who could really care less, about a general election, and it's just how far to the left or to the right they can go, to make their point.
Yeah, it's kind of remarkable how few people in elective office that I really care to associate with. Regardless, regardless, I mean, it wasn't that way when I started. I could hang
Same,
out with just about everybody.
same, absolutely.
Okay, so you don't have to have an answer for this, but
Okay.
uh, we often talk about our successes. We talk about the great things we do, and I love doing that. But
Hmm.
I do like to talk about failures, the screw ups, the things that like, and it could be it could be just forgetting to say thank you to people at Starbucks this morning. That's okay. But is
Yeah.
there like a mess up thing that you really got messed up that you regret, but you learn from, like something that you can teach the world about? Like, this was a screw up, and I learned from that experience.
Oh, what a good question. And I'm thinking back during the past few years I've been in LDF, and I've been very privileged to be there. But one thing that I would say is that, um, having tough conversations earlier is something that I wish I had done a better job of. Um, Redistricting is an inherent political process, and just having those tough conversations with members or electeds whose districts are going to be affected earlier on, and getting them out of the way, and not letting that kind of that animosity build up. And by the time you have a conversation, they're frustrated and angry, and other people have gotten involved. So just having those tougher those tougher conversations earlier, something I wish I would have done. And second, is that there was a time when I thought that jobs in this industry were really, really scarce. I thought that working in public policy and and policy making was, was there were jobs were few and far between, and so I might have stayed somewhere longer than I really needed to, because I didn't know what else was out there. But it's like, once you get to a certain level, like, you see another job posting you're qualified for, that you would want to do every week. Um, and so, I guess just never being afraid to leave, and knowing that another good opportunity is just around the corner.
That's great.
There's always campaigns, and there's always an election. There's always a campaign, always an election. The 2024 cycle has already started, and it's the morning after the 2023 cycle. There's runoffs for the mayor of Houston coming up. A couple of runoffs I saw. So, that Louisiana has a runoff elections for Attorney General, Secretary of State, and State Treasurer, 18. So there's never not an election. There's never not a campaign or some kind of effort going on that you can work on.
Well, and I think you're a great example of that because of the opportunities that are out there. And you've worked at the local level, the city level, at the legislative level. You're working, to some degree nationally. So, I mean, you people shouldn't be afraid to jump into the city of Houston mayor race and not think that they can get themselves back into DC, because that's not true. The
No,
skills,
that's how this industry operates.
right?
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, so I'm always interested, and I know other people are interested in how people organize their lives, how people get news, how what their tech stack looks like. So you wake up
Mhm.
in the morning. What's the first three things you're looking at? Is it AP News? Is it Drudge? Is it HuffPo? What are you looking at for news in the morning?
I start my day with Morning Joe.
Okay,
It's on every morning while I'm eating and getting dressed. That's the first thing, and then I read the political playbook. That's where I get most of my sources from. Um, yes, I think I'd say those two things: Morning Joe and the political playbook.
okay. And what apps like can you not live without for business or personal? Like what are the few things that you gotta use throughout the day, no matter what?
Definitely Instagram. for
Okay.
for both actually. Most of my network on there is elected officials and other people from that are politically related, so I get to see where they are, what they're thinking. And sometimes that helps me inform what I'm going to be dealing with the next day or later that same day. If I see an elected official who I work with posting about an article, or there's something with the big thing in New Jersey that happened with the company canceling the offshore, the wind farm that they were building. I knew that was something I was going to have to deal with in the next few days. So just really looking to see what the electeds that I work with and the other people in my political network are posting or are concerned about, and what elections they're working on. Yeah, that's probably my favorite one that I'm on most of the day.
Awesome. And professionally, organizationally, what's your tools of choice? I know some people are pen and legal pad. Maybe that was your training in law school, or that
Yeah.
you carried forward, or is it an iPad with a stylus? Is it taking notes in Apple Notes? How do you kind of organize how you're going to get stuff done?
So I took the bar exam on a laptop. We were one of the first generations, I guess, or classes that were able to take the bar exam on a laptop. So that's pretty much how I've kept. I type all of my meeting notes or things that I'm seeing in a Word document, and I have them saved in various folders to keep myself organized. And I always make sure it's dated. But if it's something really quickly, or I'm getting a call from a senator or a representative, and I'm not able to get to my laptop, I keep a notebook with me, to make sure I'm not missing anything.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think we're kind of old school that way. I like to put everything in the computer in our apps, but I got to have that pen and paper because
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Especially when things are moving really, really fast,
right,
as
right.
they often do in this industry.
Now interpreting my handwriting later on, that's the problem.
That's always a challenge. That's always a challenge. That's why as much as I can, I try to type, because
Yeah.
when I'm writing really, really fast, and especially in meetings where you're in meetings with these caucus and these delegations, and two or three different people are trying to speak, and everyone wants to show that they're smartest in the room. It's like, could one of y'all please? Can we have one person at a time speak, please?
Well, I mean, that's the biggest challenge, right? Because you're the smartest person in the room, and they all think.
Well, I think that's why I prefer individual and one-on meetings with members and elected officials, because you can give them, you can be the politician, and treat them like the constituent, right?
Right.
And so you make them feel like they're like they're the smartest person, or they've got your full undivided attention, and they eat that up.
It's true. Uh, all right. So last thing, personal credo or piece of advice for people in any part of their career. Is there like one thing that's like you live by, or anything you want to impart on the world?
Nothing that I really live by, but the same mentor that I've talked about a couple of other times, President Gallo. I was going through a really difficult time, you know, during redistricting early this year, with people being upset with our map, and having tough conversations with members of Congress. And I called him and said, what should I do? And he just told me to build and battle. He said, you're building, you're building a map for your community. You're building something that's going to last, something that's going to sustain for at least until the next congressional redistricting cycle. So keep building. And he said, and at the same time, you've got to battle. You got to do both simultaneously. So build and battle. That's what I will say.
I love it. Awesome. Thank you very much, Jared. Really appreciate it. We'll look forward to keeping the conversation going.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me. Take care.
This has been Insights to Communicate with Adam Probalski, president of the woman and Latina-owned market and opinion research firm, Probalski Research.